Hello, Christine. This is Nathan Barnes, PhD. I am editing your book for you through Guru. First of all, thank you for choosing me. I had a great time with your book. Want to say from the get-go, congratulations for making it this far in the writing of your book. It really has a tremendous structure. It's really strong in terms of plot. You create your characters, and then something happens to them. Just as the reader starts sympathizing with Red, he's gone. Or with the truck, that's gone, then Red. And you have this wonderful interplay between Red and the truck, and you know the characters get developed, and then something happens that's wonderful. So in terms of structure, I think the book was extremely strong. And then there are a lot of weaknesses in the book, and that's what I want to concentrate on. Because as you see, I made down here at the arrow, I made almost 800 insertions, a little over 1,000 deletions, formatting 35. Don't worry about that, and 393 comments. So, in my opinion, the book needs a lot of work. And what I would do if I were you is get a glass of wine and just review my suggestions. And I used Microsoft Word track changes so you can accept or reject anything. Now, I tried to go the extra mile and remove some of your repetitions. I just want to go over some of this with you here. Um, you have the words here in the bold. I'm making a list of re repeated phrases and words, and I noticed that the word even was in the book 109 times. Now, that does include words like eventually, and evening, and event. But I went ahead and removed. I did a search and replace, and I just removed the word even. And I think that improves your writing quite a bit because you really never need it. And I went through and tried to, it created a little bit of extra space after the word even. There might be a couple of extra spaces in the manuscript. So as you're going through the manuscript, you might want to just check and see if there's an extra space. Now, also quickly, that was in the manuscript 48 times. Now you got to remember, your manuscript is only a little over 100 pages. So when you have a word in there 100 times, or even 48 times, the reader's going to notice. And then you have a lot of your facial expressions, and I'm going to include in my notes and in my comments. I've already included some resources that help you along. You really need to study facial expressions. You have a lot of pursing of the lips. You're not as bad as some of the writers I see. Some writers, pursing of the lips is the only facial expression that they have in the entire book. I read an author one time. He had 13 books, and he had the expression lips pursing like over 100 times. Every character did it all the time. And I said, man, you have to research facial expressions and give the reader something a little bit more. Now, you're not near as bad as that, but the pursing of the lips, faces turning red, smiling ear to ear, all the winking, the smirking. You have all of your characters doing this, and that's not good. You need to liven up these characters a little bit. But again, in terms of the structure of the book is wonderful, but it does need some work in that. So your also hair is always disheveled. You're gonna have to get away from that. I would just remove disheveled completely from your vocabulary in the book, and research how to describe hair and describe it better. Okay, now you overuse the dash, the poor little dash. We're talking about the little short dash, and let's see if I can show you in your original here. So I'm going to view the original without the markup and just go down here. There's two things that you did that I had to correct that were pervasive throughout the manuscript that I had to correct. One was the use of the short dash, and I mean it's everywhere. So I might be able to find it soon. The other thing that was pervasive throughout the manuscript was the use of ellipses. The three dots. You had four dots signifying an ellipses, and they were everywhere. So I tried to remove all of the ellipses unless somebody's speaking and it's interrupted by another part of a sentence, and then like you really need to have a pause in the manuscript. But let's just scroll down and see if I can find an example. I'm saying it's pervasive and then I don't see anything. Um, I wonder if it got removed. Bear with me just for a second. Okay, so here it is. That's just everywhere in the manuscript. And if you pick up a book, I don't think you're going to find that. It's not popular in the books that I read, and I read hundreds of books. You either have a long dash, which is called an EM dash. I'll show you what that looks like. If you're using Windows, it's Control Alt minus, and it completely changed the view here. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and undo that because I don't want to mess things up. Okay, so you overuse the dash, and I think that you're going to know what I'm talking about whenever I say that. Okay, here it was right here. So you overuse the dash, and what I did was, I'm going to show you the final. I added a long dash for when a dash is needed. It's called an EM dash. That's just EM dash, if you want to search for that and look it up. So I removed all those, excuse me, and I tried to remove, I'm going to go back to the original, and I tried to remove, a lot of times you didn't need this, but I'm reading this sentence here, but he did what he had to do for red. You have that dash, you don't need the dash. So I removed the dash where it wasn't needed, and, because it's just so unusual. And then I also removed, like this right here, you have these 4 ellipses, and then that little dot right there is a space. So you don't need the 4 ellipses in the space. So that's some copy editing that had to be done. I think you're going to like the look of the manuscript. Okay, so let's get on to 2 things that are really, in my opinion, significant weaknesses in the book. For one thing, you did a great job, and I just want to express how good of a job I think you did on highlighting how Fort Worth is urban. It's the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States, and it's been that way for 10 years. We're just a huge, huge area, but the Texas nature of it really is. There are areas in Fort Worth and around Fort Worth that are undeveloped, and it's Texas prairie, and it's wonderful. And I think that you really, man, you nailed that. Like whenever you have Kit, she's has a horse and she goes and rides her horse all the time, but she lives in the stockyards and she listens to heavy metal. I mean, I thought that really engaged the nature of Fort Worth. But one thing that's missing and incorrect, in my opinion, about Fort Worth is the urban nature of it. You kind of miss how far away everything is. Like you have Kit being able to walk from one place to another. Like you can't walk from the stockyards in downtown Fort Worth to any place where it has 30-acre ranch where you could ride a horse. You're going to have to travel 20 or 30 minutes out of town to get to where you can do that. So I had a really hard time, knowing the geography of Fort Worth. I had a really hard time imagining, moving from location to location within the book. And another thing that really highlighted that was the trip from Arlington. You had her in Arlington Convention Center, and going back to Fort Worth. That's a 15-minute trip on the freeway, which is extremely relaxing and beautiful. But there aren't any one lane highway, country highways between Arlington and Fort Worth. Arlington and Fort Worth are like one big city. It's like there's nothing but concrete between Arlington and Fort Worth. It's really hard to imagine if you don't live here. But there are several freeways. Like 3 freeways that connect Fort Worth and Arlington. Between those freeways, you got houses and you've got businesses, and there's a little bit of open area, but there isn't anything like what you've described, unless I haven't been exploring everywhere, but I've lived here for 10 years, and it just seemed um, just bizarre. And another thing about that scene is she is in the middle of nowhere out there, and she a tornado catches her by surprise. Now, we don't have surprise tornadoes out here, and part of that is because of the geography. We live in a depressed area, and tornadoes in this whole metroplex area are extremely rare. And whenever they do happen, it's devastating because there's so many people living here. But we live. It's really hard for me to explain because I don't quite understand it completely. But we live in a depressed area, and storms just fly right over us, and they're hitting Wichita Falls, they're hitting Joshua, they're hitting Justin. You know, towns outside of this little depressed area. It's like a river basin. So we don't have storms like that. What does happen, and it's happened to me before, is you can be out here on the freeway or even out on a highway between Arlington and Fort Worth. You can get stuck in a storm easily, and it's fucking terrifying. Because we have hail that can destroy windshields, and you could be driving along, not paying attention to the weather, and be blinded by a storm. If you're out there, and I can't express how terrifying this is. Um, Excuse me. Yeah, they say Martin Luther was caught in a storm one time. That's how he gave his life to the Lord, and he became a pastor because he was so terrified. I mean, I don't think you really captured just how extremely terrifying it is to have hail just battering down on your truck. You can't see anywhere. It's unlikely that she would encounter a tornado. It is likely that she could be blinded and run into a telephone pole and destroy her truck, or run into a ditch and flip her truck. But getting out and seeing a tornado is just it was just bizarre. And I think a critic, if I mean, I see great potential for this book. And if someone like me, I've lived in Texas all my life, and I've lived in Fort Worth for 10 years. I've been caught in storms before, and I know what it's like. I was going to tell you, one day I was driving down the street, and I was driving down it's a 6-lane road. It's not a highway, but it's a road that connects Fort Worth and Crowley. It's called Crowley Road by the locals. There's an overpass where 20 goes over Crowley Road, and it goes over the regular 6 lanes of traffic, plus it goes over all the other lanes that you need to turn around and stuff on both sides. So it's awesome, really really big, because the bridge is Highway 20, which also has 6 lanes, and then 6 more lanes on the other side. So I mean, you're talking like 6 roads deep and 8 or 9 roads wide. It's a huge area. Well, I was driving one day. I was driving to school, and I was driving under the overpass, and I saw 300 police cars just bumper to bumper underneath the bridge, because they're all they're protecting their cars from the hail that was going to come, and I didn't know that. So I drove through it, and I thought it was the end of the world. It was just quiet. There were no people, just cars. And then I saw locals kind of coming up underneath the bridge, and I was like, man, I better turn around. So I turned around, and as I turned around, it started to rain, and I was in a pickup. So my pickup was being blown on the road. I was only going 20 miles an hour, and my pickup was going like this. Oh, sorry, it was going like this. And then I looked down the road, and it's flat, so I could see about 3 miles ahead. And if you can imagine a tree-lined road, all the way down is trees for 3 or 4 miles, and on both sides of the road, trees were just falling down onto the road like that, all the way down. So I got in the middle of the road. This is a 4 lanes on each side plus a turning lane in the middle, and it's terrifying. That's something you can use in your book if you want to. But it's much more realistic than getting out of your truck and seeing a tornado pass by, because you can survive that. I know people that have done that and have survived, but because of the geography, and also I can tell you that tornadoes don't just come out of nowhere. Tornadoes are the result of storms, they're not the beginning of storms. So uh, for a tornado to happen, there already has to be rain. There has to be, a severe thunderstorm that you can see from a car, and then the storm happens. So that anytime you're talking about Fort Worth, you're moving from place to place, that becomes very weak. So you need to meditate on use Google Maps and look and see if your um, descriptions are plausible when you have her walking somewhere or whenever you have her moving from place to place. So that was weak. And the other thing that was weak is related to my next point is your sex scene at Avoca was. I told my wife about it. It's kind of funny, like maybe we should recreate this, because Avoca, you have them go into Avoca, get a coffee, and then they have sex in the back of an ambulance. So Avoca's parking is in the front of the building, and it's a big open area, and they have picnic tables out there, and it's not unusual for people to be sitting out at the picnic tables. And in the back of Avoca, it's like there's several shops right in a row, and there are businesses. There's houses. People live back there, and there are. In short, there's no way you could park an ambulance anywhere close to Avoca, have sex in the back of it, and not draw some attention to yourself. Now, I wrote in my comments that the bathrooms in Avoca are reasonably nice, but they're right at the front when you walk in. You walk into Avoca, and on the left side, there's a huge coffee roaster. It's just magnificent. It's like a huge room, um, almost as big as the rest of the coffee shop where they roast their coffee beans. And there's also the two bathrooms right there. There's bathrooms. There's a door. It's a glass area, and then there's the coffee roaster, and it's just massive. Um, anyway, you could conceivably have sex in those bathrooms. They're big enough for two people, but there's no way two people can get into those bathrooms and not be seen going in and out, especially if the EMT is in a uniform. So I encourage you to not have them having sex at Avoca. And I said it would be more reasonable if she had sex with a delivery boy, or in Texas, if you want to get, make it more like a Fort Worth type thing, you can have her have sex with a grocery delivery guy. It's very unusual. I've been told. I worked in a grocery store, and I used to carry out groceries whenever I was in high school. And man, women wanted to have sex with me so much, it was just insane. Ladies would invite me over to their homes whenever their husbands were out of town, and man, that's how you can get action. I don't think that EMTs see much action out here because, man, they have GPS in their cars, and most of them. A point that I made was they are professionals. These guys aren't available. They've either got girlfriends or they've got meaningful relationships. Long-term relationships with wives and girlfriends because they've had to go to school for a long time in order to become an EMT. So they're not going to be, it would be very unrealistic for her to have sex with an EMT guy, for a number of reasons. And something that I wanted to say was the sex um, in an EMT. It sounds more exciting than it actually probably is because the EMTs that I've been in, I've been in a few ambulances, and there's like no room. There's no room at all. You have two seats, and in the middle you have a bunch of junk and stuff, and then you have the back. I mean, it's very difficult to go from the front to the back of the ambulance. And you have room. You have like metal side benches, and then you have a gurney. I mean, we're talking like there's no room inside of these things. So I mean, it's conceivable it could happen, but it just sounds very uncomfortable. So that moves me on to my my next point. I read a lot of books. We're talking three. Let's just say three fiction books and five nonfiction books a week, and they're all best-selling books. I don't think I've ever read a sex scene in a book. Like what you have. I haven't read 50 Shades of Grey, and I don't read those cheap, which your book is not. Your book is not like a cheap romance book. I read a fair amount of romance, probably 10 or 12 this year, and most of the sex is sexual tension. You have a lot of sexual tension, or you have something building up to sex, and then they wake up the next day. Like I feel that there's a possibility that you're limiting your audience with the way you're describing sex in your book. So I would keep that in mind. And then on top of that, the sex that you're describing isn't that great, to be perfectly honest. So one thing I was going to encourage you to do is think about what you're trying to say with these sexual episodes, and realize. I want to convince you that you're being unrealistic, except for maybe one or two. I think there's five sex scenes. One of them you have in the back of the ambulance, which I've already said, not as much fun as it seems. Second thing I remember is you had a line that went something like, he touched her like a middle-aged man, or like a man would touch a Corvette. And I talked to my wife about this, and I was like, honey, have you ever looked at a man washing his car and want me to touch you like he touches his car? Like, you got to think about your reader and how your reader wants to interact with what you're saying. One other sex scene you had was also really divorced from the scene. You have them line dancing in Sundance Square, and I have no idea where to line dance in Sundance Square. Suggested Billy Bob's, which is a much better location to line dance. Known for line dancing, it's awesome, and they can sneak off and have sex somewhere. But you have them having sex in Sundance Square, I think, on hay bales, and I'm like, this author can't have had the same experience that I've had with hay bales. I've been around hay bales all my life. They're not comfortable. Hay bales are they're coarse. They're basically sticks. That's like they're smooth they're smoother than a stick, but they'll poke you and scratch you. And you only get on a hay bale if you're clothed. You're not going to have sex on a hay bale, unless you like it painful. One thing that you could do is have them lay a blanket down. A blanket would work, or maybe even their clothes on top of the hay bale. But there's no place in Sundance Square for a hay bale, and this is a big modern downtown area. It has a southwestern feel, but it's a tourist attraction. It's not like there's hay bales laying around in Sundance Square, or even if I'm mistaken, my memory is mistaken, it could have been in the stockyards, but even in the stockyards, you're not going to want to have sex there. So it's kind of like, I thought about, there are a lot of jokes about sex in the shower. It's good on TV, but whenever you try it at home, it's not so good. So there's just a physics of it. It's just impossible. So let's see. So I think your sex scenes need to be rewritten and toned down a little bit. Instead you need to drive home. Think about. I think I understand what you're trying to say. But you need to slow down and communicate better to your reader point. So people are much more interested in sexual tension than they are in the actual act of sex. So anyway, that's just that. I understand if you want to keep it in, but you have to know it's rare to have this much. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. It's rare. So let's see. What else did I want to say? Ah, yes, the guitar. Let me show you something. Okay, you have Red smashing a guitar, which broke my heart. I've been playing guitar for 20 years, maybe even longer than that. This is a $300 guitar. I play sometimes in public. I never play this guitar. This one is made in China, and I'll just let you hear what it sounds like. Okay, that's a $300 guitar. Now I'm going to make a point in a second. This is a $3,000 guitar. You can rewind and look at the $300 guitar. This is 10 times more expensive. I've had this guitar since 1993, and if somebody smashed it, I don't know what I would lose my mind. I put it in my comments. It's like if somebody had hit my mother, with a hammer or something. I've been taking care of this guitar for a really, really long time. So let me just play it for you for a second. Okay, so you have him smashing your guitar, which in my experience is a very serious offense. So, granted, he is drunk, but if you're smashing a man's guitar, you need to describe the guitar a little bit better. Is it a $300 guitar? Is it a $3,000 guitar? Like, people don't know guitars, they don't know. So Red probably didn't know, but the guitarist does. And he also, sometimes guitarists leave $3,000 guitars on the stage. That's another thing I need to talk to you about. It's the same kind of urban and country dichotomy that we have in Fort Worth. We have very expensive things in Fort Worth. Just because it's a guitar doesn't mean it's cheap. So if it's a acoustic guitar, both of these guitars that I showed you, the $3,000 guitar and the $300 guitar, they're going to shatter to smithereens if you slam them down on a stage. If it's an electric guitar, that can still be very expensive, and it can take a beating. Those guitars are solid pieces of wood usually, and they can take a beating. And where they're going to break, they break differently too, because of physics. This is all hollow, so whenever you smash an acoustic guitar against the stage, all this is going to break. All this right here, all this is hollow. Now, an electric guitar, all of this is solid, and it weighs more than the neck. So whenever you hit an electric guitar on the stage, the neck is going to break. Now, right here, right where the body connects to the thing. I was in a heavy metal band for a while, if you can believe that. So I know how guitars break. But anyway, just thought you should know that. Okay, 2 more points. One, wildlife in Fort Worth. You have her looking for prairie dogs on a horse. People on horses hate prairie dogs. We hate them because they dig holes in the ground, and that's what breaks horses' legs. So if she's been riding horses all her life, I don't think that prairie dogs are very prevalent out here in Fort Worth. But if she has any experiences with prairie dogs, are going to be negative. And horses, they step in the prairie dog holes and break their legs. And we don't have bison out here. That you can't just go down to the Trinity River and look at bison. The only bison out here are in a nature preserve, I think. So that's not going to happen. So you need to look a little bit at the nature out here at Fort Worth. Okay, excuse me. I'm having to do this video in one take, so I'm having to remember everything. Okay, something about the geography of Fort Worth. In 2005 or so, all the ranches in the area started getting deals with the Barnett Shale Company because we found a way out here to frack natural gas out of the shale. Shale is the geological formations that's under the ground, and there's a lot of natural gas stuck down there. So I have a friend of mine who has 12 acres, maybe it could be a little bit more than that, out south of Fort Worth. He got a check for at least 6 years for $135,000 a month because of the natural gas underneath his land. So that said, the ranch that the refuge ranch that you have in your book, it's sitting on millions of dollars worth of oil. And that can feed into that's how we exist. Fort Worth was built on cattle, and Dallas was built on oil. So Dallas is big city east. Everybody here hates Dallas because Dallas is all wealthy. And out here with cattle, we built our economy on cattle. It's not to say that everybody knows anything about cattle, but that's what we built our economy on. And so now, because of the fracking, which is the method of pulling the natural gas out, you can look it up, FRACK, frack. It's controversial, but they get the gas out and they send you a check, and it's wonderful. So it's something to consider that you don't have any natural gas mentioned, and that would have been a plot point in the book, and that could be something for the future. I really hope that you write more books on these characters. I made a note on accents. Texans do not say gots. We say gotta or fixinta. We don't say gots. So you're going to have to take out gots. And I can see gots right here in the original. You see it right there. Come on, kid. Okay, I'm going to switch to final. I tried to remove all of it, but okay. Final, we've all. I'll show you. Got it. Gotta take a breath here and there. So let's see what chapter this is. I think it's early, yeah, chapter 1. So I'm gonna go through chapter 1 one more time. I'm doing my second pass today. Okay, so we got that. You need to look at the nature. You need to look at the accents, and that leads me to your foreign languages. You have a Mexican saying ear, ir. Nino Loco, I think. I have no idea what you're trying to say. I have a Spanish minor in college. I know that IR is infinitive, which means to go. And you had an exclamation point, so I thought get out of here maybe is what you're trying to say. But that's not how you say get out of here. You said to go. Small kid. So you have to do something better with that. And I can't remember. My Spanish is not good enough to correct you. I just know it's wrong. And then the Greek was wrong. I think I tried to look it up backwards. Tried to look up what using Google Translate, see what you could have tried to mean. And then you provided the translation, which was like beautiful rose or something like that. Greek endings. I know biblical Greek. I don't know modern Greek. But I know that that modern Greek has similar endings on the words, and you're not saying what you want to say whenever you use Greek. So and I don't think that their words are capitalized. So you need to do a little bit better research on that. And I can see a little error right here. And if you look, that's because I searched and replaced even. I got even out of there. It caused a few errors, so I'm going to be looking at that before I send this back to you. So I think that's everything. I made a lot of notes. Usually I'll type up everything, but I thought it'd be easier just to talk it out with you. If you want, we can have a telephone call, but I think I've pretty much covered everything. And like I said, I think you did a great job on as far as the plot points go. The plot was excellent, and it's the right length. In closing, a few things I'm remembering. 101st Airborne Division is Army, and then you have the Marine Corps. So he joins the Marine Corps. Okay, so he's 18. I'm having trouble placing the ages on everybody here. You have um, Vietnam War, and that was in the 60s. I'm 40 years old, and my dad was too young to fight in Vietnam by like 10 years. So I'm like, if their dads were Vietnam vets, when are you writing this? When is the setting? So it seems like the setting is supposed to be now, but you have Vietnam War, and you also have Red in a bar, and before he leaves, he's drunk in a bar. But it seemed like he he was only in the service for a few years, and he's coming home. And didn't he leave whenever he was 18? And now he's almost coming back. Like I have a really difficult time imagining how old everybody is. What the first thing is the Vietnam War, and the second thing, because the Vietnam War was so long ago, they would have been 18 like in the 80s. So, that was really hard to wrap my mind around, and that's something that you might need to clarify. That and Red's military service, when he joined and when he got out, was just kind of hazy for me. I also think you should change the names of Tex. You don't have Tex in Texas, and I also know that you're trying to draw a link between Big Red the truck, and um, Red the guy. Um, I thought it was confusing to have Red being a nickname and using Red and Bobby. I had to read it a few times. What world is she talking about? So I think that if you have a nickname, you should use a nickname. Like if you use Red, you should only use Bobby's name like once or twice in the book, and not like a lot. And switching back from Red and Bobby. That was a little bit confusing. So anyway, okay, let me know if you have questions, and love the book.